I watched my daughter-in-law, Ashley, casually toss my granddaughter Isabella's cherished baby blanket into the garbage bin. Without a second thought, instinct took over. I rushed to the dumpster and rescued it just in the nick of time. My heart aching for Isabella, I clutched the blanket and hurried home. Spreading it out on the bed, my fingers detected an odd lump. Something hard was sewn within the fabric, nestled between the layers of soft cotton. A wave of curiosity, like a chilling tremor, washed over me. I grabbed a pair of scissors from the drawer, my hands trembling as I meticulously undid the seam, pulling apart the threads one by one. And what I discovered hidden inside left me utterly speechless. Never could I have imagined that something so seemingly insignificant could hold such a horrifying truth. Because what I found wasn't just a mere object. It was concrete evidence of a lie that had been festering for years. It was the truth surrounding my son's untimely death. It was the darkest, most closely guarded secret my daughter-in-law had been harboring. And as the realization of what it truly meant dawned on me, I knew my life would be irrevocably changed. Before I continue, please take a moment to subscribe and let me know where in the world you're tuning in from. The story I'm about to share is something I still struggle to believe is real. My name is Elenina, and I am 69 years old. For the past 3 years, I've lived alone in this house, ever since the day I lost my only son. Matthew was just 32 when he passed away. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in September. I received a frantic call from Ashley, her voice choked with sobs and screams. She told me Matthew had been in an accident, that he had fallen down the stairs at their home, hitting his head, and was unresponsive. I raced to the hospital in a mere 15 minutes, driving like a woman possessed. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. Gloria and I got ready. She would stay in the car at first, waiting for my signal. If I managed to distract Ashley long enough, Gloria would come in with some excuse. We would search for anything that could serve as additional evidence. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we arrived at Ashley's house, a 2-story house with white paint and a well-kept garden. The same house where Matthew had died, where he had supposedly fallen down the stairs, where his life had ended. I rang the doorbell. My heart was beating so fast, I thought it would leap out of my chest. I heard footsteps, and the door opened to reveal Ashley. She was wearing black pants and a salmon-colored blouse. Her hair was perfectly styled, and her makeup was as impeccable as always. "Hi, Elenina," she said with a cold smile.
"Come in."
I entered the house, and the scent of lavender filled the air. Everything was clean, tidy, and perfect. Too perfect, as if nothing bad had ever happened within those walls. "Where is Isabella?" I asked. "Upstairs in her room." "I'll call her." Ashley went up the stairs, the same stairs where Matthew had supposedly fallen. I examined every step, looking for some sign, some mark, but there was nothing. Ashley came down with Isabella in her arms. My granddaughter had grown so much. She was 3 years old now, her dark hair falling in soft curls over her shoulders. Her eyes were identical to Matthew's. Seeing her broke my heart and filled me with love at the same time. "Hi, Grandma," Isabella said in her sweet little voice, extending her little arms towards me. I took her, hugged her tight. She smelled like baby shampoo and innocence.
She was.
Here's the translation, rewritten in the interpret and clarify style. That little girl was the only pure thing my son had left behind, the one spark of goodness that had managed to survive all the darkness that had befallen us. "I missed you so much, my love," I whispered to her. She rewarded me with a sweet smile. "And in the meantime, Isabella is still with her." The detective looked at me with a hint of compassion. "I understand your concern, but legally, Ashley is the girl's guardian. I can't take her away without a court order, and for that, I need solid proof. Isn't the phone enough?" I pressed, desperate for reassurance. The detective sighed. "It's important evidence, but a good lawyer could argue that it was planted, that we don't know for sure where it came from. I need more. I need testimonies, forensic evidence, clear connections." I felt a surge of helplessness. "How long will all this take?" Gloria asked, voicing my unspoken fears. The detective shrugged. It depends. If I find what I'm looking for quickly, maybe a couple of weeks. If not, it could take months. I didn't have months. I couldn't leave Isabella with Ashley that long. There's something else, I blurted out. Ashley was incredibly nervous yesterday. She was constantly looking at her phone as if she was waiting for something or planning something. The detective noted this down as well. Do you have any idea what it could be? I shook my head. No, but it gave me a bad feeling.
All right, he said.
I'm going to put discreet surveillance on her house. If she tries anything, we'll know. That calmed me down a little. At least they would be watching her, monitoring her actions. At least they would know if she tried to run away or harm Isabella. We said goodbye to the detective, who gave us his personal number. Call me if you notice anything strange, anything, no matter what time it is. I nodded, committing his words to memory. Gloria and I left the precinct, stepping out into the harsh glare of the midday sun. It was hot, but I felt a chill deep inside. What do we do now? Gloria asked, her voice laced with apprehension. Wait, I said bitterly, the word heavy with resignation. Wait and pray that they find enough to arrest her. The following days were an agonizing torment. That man, the detective explained, was named Adrian Wells. He worked as a lab technician and, according to multiple accounts, he and Lydia were in a relationship. Where is he now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The detective looked down somberly. He died 3.5 years ago, 6 months after Lydia's disappearance. A chilling sensation washed over me. How did he die? The detective met my gaze directly.
Car accident.
He lost control of his car on a highway, went down a ravine, and died instantly. Another accident, I murmured. The detective nodded grimly.
Exactly.
And guess who reported the accident? Who was the first to arrive at the scene? I already knew the answer. Ashley. The detective placed another photo on the table. Ashley was on duty that night. She claimed she was on her way home when she witnessed Adrienne's car veer off the road. She called emergency services, but by the time they arrived, Adrienne was already dead. We believe she killed him, too. The detective paused, taking a deep breath. We have no definitive proof. The case was closed as an accident. But now, with everything we've learned, we are reopening the investigation. There are simply too many coincidences. First, Lydia disappears, then Adrienne dies, then Matthew dies, all connected in some way, all dead in circumstances that Ashley could have manipulated. My hands began to tremble uncontrollably. How many people did she kill? I asked, my voice filled with horror. How many lives did she destroy? The detective closed the file. I don't know yet, but we're going to find out. I'm going to review every case, every suspicious death connected to Ashley in the last 5 years. If there are more victims, we will uncover them. I left the precinct in a state of utter shock. Ashley wasn't just a murderer. She was a serial killer, meticulous, calculating, and ruthless. She had systematically eliminated anyone who posed a threat to her. I never responded. I simply couldn't bring myself to forgive someone complicit in my son's murder. Yet, he at least possessed the decency to acknowledge his guilt and attempt to atone for his sins. He passed away in prison 5 years ago from a heart attack at just 53. When I learned of his death, I felt nothing at all, neither relief nor sorrow, only complete indifference. It was a closed chapter in a story I desperately wanted to forget. Ashley, however, remains alive, serving 6 consecutive life sentences in a maximum security prison. Isabella once inquired if I wished to visit her, to confront the woman who murdered her father and stole her childhood. I vehemently refused. I have no need to see her, nor do I desire her explanation. All I require is the assurance that she is where she belongs, paying the price for her actions. Isabella respected my decision. She, too, had no desire to meet Ashley. In her eyes, that woman was a ghost from the past, a figure existing only in cautionary tales about the depths of human evil. Her true family was me, Gloria, and the cherished friends she had made, the people who genuinely loved her. Some months ago, Isabella presented me with a gift, carefully wrapped in lavender paper. "Open it," she said, smiling warmly. I unwrapped it with care. Inside was a blanket, new, hand-knitted, and a soft, mint green, identical to the one I had made so many years before. "I made it myself," Isabella explained. "I learned to knit. I wanted to recreate the blanket that brought us together, the one that saved my life." Tears streamed down my face as I embraced her tightly. "It's perfect," I choked out. "It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me." That night, I spread the new blanket on my bed. I then retrieved the old blanket from the closet, the one I had kept all these years, and compared them. They were nearly identical. But this new blanket held no hidden secrets. It had no pain woven into its fibers. When I entered the emergency room, Ashley was slumped in a chair, her face buried in her hands. She was wearing a pearl gray dress, its sleeves stained with blood. She spotted me and ran to embrace me, sobbing uncontrollably against my shoulder. All I wanted was to see my son. I desperately needed to see him. A doctor emerged, wearing that solemn expression doctors have when they're about to deliver devastating news. And he uttered the words that shattered my world. Matthew was gone. Severe head trauma. There was nothing they could do. I screamed. I wept. I collapsed onto the cold, sterile floor of the hospital. Ashley held me, whispering that everything would be all right, that Matthew would have wanted us to be strong. But nothing was all right. Nothing would ever be all right again. My husband had died 15 years prior from a heart attack, and now my son was gone, too. Matthew was all I had left. He was a brilliant, dedicated doctor, working tirelessly at the hospital, saving lives. He had married Ashley 2 years before his death.
She was a nurse as well.
They had met at work. He introduced her to me one Sunday afternoon. I remember she wore a cream-colored dress, and her smile seemed almost too perfect, too polished. But Matthew was deeply in love. His eyes sparkled whenever he looked at her. He told me she was the woman of his life, that he wanted to start a family with her, and I desperately wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe my son had found happiness. A year after their wedding, Ashley became pregnant. Matthew was ecstatic. He called me every day, sharing updates on the baby's growth. They bought a new house. They painted the little girl's room a delicate soft pink. Matthew himself assembled the crib. I remember seeing him so happy, so filled with hope. And when Isabella was born, I felt like life had granted me a precious gift, a second chance to love and nurture. My granddaughter was beautiful, tiny, and delicate, with Matthew's captivating dark eyes. She proudly showed me the doll she held tightly in her hand, a small, well-loved brown bear. She began to spin a fanciful tale about him, and I listened intently while also keeping a watchful eye on Ashley out of the corner of my eye. Ashley was standing by the window, completely absorbed by her phone. She appeared distracted, almost jittery, as if she were anxiously awaiting a message or a visitor. I decided to seize the opportunity. Quickly, I pulled out my cell phone and sent a brief text to Gloria. "Come in now." Just a few minutes later, the doorbell shattered the silence. Ashley visibly jumped, startled. "Were you expecting someone?" I asked, trying my best to sound nonchalant. She shook her head, her brow furrowing in confusion. She hesitantly made her way to the door and opened it. Gloria stood there, radiating warmth with a kind smile. "Hello. Please excuse my intrusion," she began. "I'm Gloria, Elenina's neighbor. I came with her, but I realized I left a bag in the car. Would it be all right if I came in quickly to use your restroom? It's quite urgent." Ashley hesitated, her eyes darting back and forth between Gloria and me. I gave her a reassuring nod, as if this were the most ordinary occurrence in the world. "Sure." Ashley finally relented, pointing down the hall. "First door on the left." Gloria stepped inside, giving me a swift, knowing glance. I understood the unspoken message. She would discreetly search for anything incriminating while I kept Ashley occupied and distracted. We desperately needed to buy some time. I jumped into the conversation. I started by asking Ashley about her work, how she was coping with everything, and whether she needed any assistance with Isabella. Ashley responded with short, clipped answers, her gaze frequently returning to her phone. She was clearly restless. Undaunted, I continued talking. Every hour stretched out endlessly, filled with gnawing anxiety. I couldn't stop thinking about Isabella, about whether she was safe, about whether Ashley suspected anything, about whether she would try to flee. Detective Roberts called me every couple of days to provide updates. He had interrogated Hugh Miller, who initially denied everything, claiming he barely knew Ashley and that they were just work acquaintances. But when confronted with the photos and messages from the phone, he crumbled, confessing to the affair. He admitted that Ashley had discussed getting rid of Matthew, but he swore he had never agreed, claiming he had told her she was crazy and that he wanted no part in it. However, the bank transfers told a different story. The detective pressed him, presenting the statements that showed $200,000 had been transferred to his account just 3 months after Matthew's death. Hugh couldn't explain it, claiming it was a loan that Ashley had given him to start a business, but he couldn't produce any documents to support his claim. "I'm holding him for 24 hours, the detective told me. "I hope he confesses. If not, I'll have to release him. I don't have enough to keep him detained." That night, he requested a lawyer and ceased all communication. The detective was forced to release him, but the investigation continued. They exhumed Matthew's body, and the second autopsy revealed a crucial detail that had been missed in the first examination. There were signs of a struggle on his wrists, bruises that indicated someone had restrained him. It hadn't been an accidental fall. It was murder. The detective confirmed. "Your son was restrained and pushed down those stairs." Tears streamed down my face, the confirmation of the truth both painful and necessary. Matthew deserved justice. They also conducted a more thorough investigation into Lydia Torres's death. Lydia, because she had the baby Ashley desperately wanted. Adrian, because he was the baby's father and could potentially claim her. And Matthew, because he possessed the wealth she craved. I returned home to find Gloria waiting for me in the living room. "What happened?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "You look pale." I recounted everything I had learned about Adrian and the possibility of even more victims. Gloria gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. "My God, it's even worse than we imagined." I couldn't sleep that night. My mind raced, dwelling on all of Ashley's victims, Lydia, Adrian, Matthew, and the countless others who may have fallen prey to her evil. I thought about the immense pain she had inflicted and how I had been so blind, so close to her for so many years, without ever truly seeing the monster she was. The next morning, Detective Roberts arrived at my house unannounced, bearing more unsettling news. "We found something else," he said grimly. "We reviewed the medical records at the hospital where Ashley worked and discovered 3 suspicious deaths of patients under her care in the last 4 years. All were elderly, and all died of cardiac arrest. At the time, no foul play was suspected. The deaths were attributed to complications of old age. But now, we are exhuming the bodies to search for traces of medication that could have induced the arrests." I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. "Are you suggesting that Ashley killed her own patients?" The detective nodded gravely. "It's a distinct possibility. If the analyses confirm that they were poisoned, then we would be looking at a total of at least 6 victims, possibly more." "Why would she do it?" I asked, struggling to comprehend the depths of her depravity. "What did she gain by killing those elderly people?" The detective produced another folder.
Money. It was always about money.
It contained only love, pure, unconditional love from a granddaughter to her grandmother. "You know," Isabella said to me one evening over dinner, "I've been thinking about Lydia, my biological mom. I wish I could have met her." I reached out and took her hand. "Me too," I said. "From what I understand, she was a good person, brave and strong. She was alone and scared, but she loved her baby. She loved you. Do you think she would be proud of me?" Isabella asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm sure of it," I replied without hesitation. "She would be incredibly proud of the woman you've become, of your accomplishments, of your kind heart. I believe that from wherever she is, she watches over you and protects you, just like your dad, Matthew." Isabella smiled through her tears. And are you, Mom, Grandma? Are you proud of me? I looked into her eyes, those eyes that reminded me so much of my son. More than proud, I said. You are the reason I am still here, the reason why every day is worth living. You saved me as much as I saved you. That night, before sleeping, I held both blankets, the old one and the new one. I reflected on the entire journey, the pain, the losses, the secrets I had uncovered, the justice I had achieved, and the love I had found amidst the darkness. The old blanket had been my guide, my map to the truth. It had held the secret that unmasked a monster, saved an innocent child, and brought justice for the dead. It was more than a simple blanket. It was a symbol of truth, resilience, and maternal love. Now, the new blanket represented the future, a future without lies, without pain, without dark secrets. It was the promise that Isabella would have the life she deserved, full of love, opportunities, and hope. 2 blankets, 2 stories, 1 family. I got out of bed and went to Isabella's room. She was asleep, breathing softly. I approached her, smoothed her hair, and kissed her on the forehead. I love you, my child, I whispered. I knitted that mint green blanket with my own 2 hands. It took me weeks to complete. Every stitch was infused with my love for her. Matthew adored it. He used to say it was magical, that every time he wrapped Isabella in it, she would instantly stop crying. He cherished that blanket as if it were a priceless treasure. But after the accident, everything changed. Ashley became withdrawn and distant. At first, I understood that she was grieving, too. She had lost her husband, too. She needed time and space to heal. But as the months passed, she brought Isabella to see me less and less frequently. She always had excuses. The child was sick, she was overwhelmed with work, or she needed to reorganize her life. I didn't want to pressure her. I didn't want to be perceived as that meddling mother-in-law. So, I waited. I called, inquiring about visiting my granddaughter. Sometimes she would agree, other times, she simply wouldn't answer. And when she did allow me to see Isabella, I noticed something unsettling. Ashley was different, colder and more detached. Her gaze no longer held that feigned warmth from before. There was a calculating glint in her eyes, something that made me uneasy. But I dismissed it as grief, assuming that Matthew's death had changed her, much like it had changed me. I tried to be understanding. I tried to give her the space she needed. Until that October afternoon, 3 years after Matthew's death, I had purchased some toys for Isabella, wanting to surprise her. I drove by Ashley's house to drop them off in the mailbox, not wanting to intrude. I simply wanted my granddaughter to know that her grandmother was thinking of her. I parked my car across the street, and that's when I saw her. Ashley was emerging from the garage, hauling trash bags, several large black bags. She was dragging them forcefully toward the dumpster. And in one of those bags, I spotted something that made my heart leap into my throat. Isabella's blanket. I mentioned that I had recently found some old photographs of Matthew and that I would love to show them to Isabella when she was older, so she could have a chance to know her father through our memories. The moment Matthew's name left my lips, Ashley noticeably stiffened. Yes, of course, when she is older. Her voice sounded strained, almost sharp. She glanced nervously towards the hallway. Your friend is taking an awfully long time. Perhaps she's not feeling well. I improvised, thinking quickly. Well, at our age, everything seems to take a bit longer. Ashley didn't appear convinced. She abruptly stood up. I'm going to check on her. My heart began to race. I needed to stop her, and fast. Wait, Ashley. There's something I wanted to ask you about. She paused, turning her attention back to me. What is it? I took a deep, steadying breath. I needed to make this next part believable. Isabella's blanket. The one I knitted for her. I haven't seen it around lately. Are you still using it? Her face underwent a subtle transformation. For the briefest of moments, I caught a glimpse of pure panic in her eyes. But she quickly regained her composure. The blanket? Yes, of course we are. It's actually in the washing machine right now. It got a little dirty. She was lying. I knew it with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, but I couldn't reveal my knowledge just yet. Oh, that's good to hear. I'm glad you still have it. Matthew loved it so much. I deliberately invoked my son's memory again, wanting to gauge her reaction. Ashley pressed her lips together tightly. Yes, Matthew loved a lot of things. There was an unmistakable edge to her tone, something bitter, something resentful. Before I could formulate a response, Gloria reappeared in the hallway. Sorry for the delay, she said, trying to sound casual. I'm feeling much better now. Ashley regarded her with open suspicion. That's great. Gloria walked towards me and gently touched my shoulder. They discovered that the land where her body had been found belonged to a company where Hugh Miller had worked as a supervisor. The connection was undeniable. Hugh had had access to that location and could have taken the body there and buried it without arousing suspicion. Furthermore, they examined Isabella's adoption records and found that there were none. Legally, Isabella was still registered as the biological daughter of Ashley and Matthew, but the original birth certificate told a different story. Someone had falsified documents and erased Lydia's trace. We are building the case, the detective told me, his voice filled with determination. Little by little, every piece fits into place. Soon, we will have enough to arrest her. Another week passed, a week filled with anguish, fear, and sleepless nights. And then, one early morning, my phone rang, jolting me awake. It was Detective Roberts, his voice sounding urgent. Mrs. Elenina, I need you to come to the precinct now. It's about Ashley. My heart stopped. What happened? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. She tried to flee. We intercepted her at the airport. She had tickets for herself and for Isabella. They were going to leave the country. I got dressed in a frenzy, my movements fueled by a desperate urgency. Gloria joined me, and we raced to the precinct, arriving in a state of breathless anxiety. The detective was waiting for us, his expression grim. He led us to an observation room, where, through a one-way mirror, I saw Ashley. She was sitting in a chair, handcuffed, her face a mask of fury and defeat. Her makeup was smeared, and her hair was disheveled, signs of her desperate attempt to escape. We arrested her 2 hours ago, the detective explained. When she tried to go through airport security, our alert system was activated. 2 of those patients had modified their wills shortly before their deaths, leaving significant donations to the hospital. Ashley had been incredibly kind and attentive to them, earning their trust. And then, mysteriously, the money from those donations vanished. It never reached the hospital. It was diverted to phantom bank accounts. We are currently tracing those accounts, and all of them have a direct connection to Ashley or Hugh. I was reeling from the relentless stream of horrifying revelations. Ashley had built a criminal empire, fueled by greed and a complete disregard for human life. She had killed, stolen, and lied, all while maintaining a facade of perfection with her charming smile and elegant clothes. No one had suspected her, until I found that fateful blanket and the hidden phone. There's something else, the detective added. Hugh is cooperating even more than we expected. He claims that Ashley hid certain documents, evidence she kept as insurance in case Hugh ever betrayed her. She wanted to have something to threaten him with. What kind of documents? I asked, leaning forward in anticipation. The detective lowered his voice. Bank records, contracts, even videos. Hugh says Ashley recorded him assisting her with Matthew's murder and that she has those recordings hidden somewhere. Where? I pressed. The detective shook his head. Hugh claims he doesn't know the exact location, that Ashley never told him, but he suspects they might be in her house, in some secret hiding place that only she knows about. My mind began to race. We need those documents, I said urgently. If they exist, they could seal the case against her beyond any doubt. The detective nodded in agreement. We already have a search warrant. We are going to search that house from top to bottom, every nook and cranny, every wall, until we find what we are looking for. That afternoon, a team of police officers arrived at Ashley's house. My reason for living. She murmured something in her sleep. I couldn't understand the words, but she was smiling. That was enough. I returned to my room, lay down, closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't have nightmares. I didn't dream of Ashley, of Matthew falling down the stairs, or of Lydia screaming. I dreamed of peace, of a garden full of flowers, of Isabella laughing, of the future. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was streaming through my window. Isabella was already awake, making breakfast. The aroma of coffee and toast filled the air. "Good morning, Mom, Grandma," she greeted me. "Good morning, my love." I sat down at the table and watched her move around the kitchen, so full of life, so strong, so different from the frightened child I had rescued years ago. She had grown up. She had become someone incredible, and I had the privilege of witnessing it, of being part of her story, of helping her write a different ending than the one Ashley had planned. "What are you thinking about?" Isabella asked as she poured me coffee. I smiled. "How lucky I am to have you, to have found that blanket that day." Isabella sat down across from me. "I think about that too, how such a simple object changed everything. It saved my life." "It wasn't the blanket," I told her. "It was you, your existence, the love your dad felt for you. That was what gave me the strength to seek the truth, to never give up." We ate breakfast together, discussing her plans, college, and her dreams. I felt that Matthew was there with us, proud and happy. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had put off for years. I went to the cemetery, to Matthew and Lydia's graves. They were in different sections, but I visited both. I brought flowers, lilacs for Matthew, white roses for Lydia. I knelt in front of my son's grave. "Hello, my love," I whispered. "Isabella is doing well. She is growing up beautiful, strong, and smart. I know you would be proud of her." That mint green blanket that I had knitted with so much love. It was crumpled and partially hanging out of the bag. Ashley shoved it into the dumpster with strange violence, as if she loathed that blanket, as if she wanted to obliterate it. I froze, utterly bewildered. Why was she discarding something so precious? Why was she getting rid of a memory of Matthew? I couldn't comprehend it. Ashley closed the dumpster lid and went back inside the house. I waited for a few minutes, my breathing shallow and uneven. I felt a mixture of rage and profound sadness. Once I was certain she wouldn't reappear, I got out of the car and walked towards the dumpster. I opened it and rummaged through the bags until I found it. And there it was, dirty, wrinkled, and reeking of expensive perfume and neglect. I carefully retrieved it, clutched it to my chest, and drove home without looking back. I arrived home trembling. I locked the door and went straight to my bedroom. I needed to be alone with that blanket. I needed to understand why Ashley had thrown it away like that, as if it were worthless trash. I spread it out on my bed carefully, smoothing it with my hands. It was soiled but intact. The delicate lace edges were still firmly in place. The mint green color appeared dull under the lamplight. I ran my fingers over the entire surface, feeling every texture, every stitch I had made years ago. And then I felt it, right in the center of the blanket, a hard, rectangular lump hidden between the layers of fabric. It wasn't part of the stuffing. It was something else. Something someone had deliberately placed there. My heart began to pound faster, and my hands started to sweat. What was this? Why was something hidden inside my granddaughter's blanket? I flipped the blanket over, searching for an opening, a concealed seam, and I found it. On the bottom edge, almost imperceptible, was a line of perfect stitches made with thread the same color as the fabric. It was the prearranged signal. She had found something. We needed to leave immediately. "Well, Ashley, we won't bother you any longer," I said, rising to my feet. "Thank you for allowing us to see Isabella." I leaned down and kissed my granddaughter's forehead. "I love you, little one. Grandma will be back to visit you soon." Isabella wrapped her small arms around me in a hug. "Bye, Grandma." Ashley ushered us towards the door. As soon as we were outside, she closed it quickly, almost violently. Gloria and I walked to the car in strained silence. We got inside, and I closed the door with a soft thud. "What did you find?" Gloria reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. It was in her bedroom closet, hidden underneath some boxes. I eagerly opened the envelope. Inside were documents related to Matthew's life insurance policy. My son had a policy for $500,000, and Ashley was listed as the sole beneficiary. The entire sum had been paid out just 3 months after his death. There were also copies of bank statements showing large transfers, including one for a staggering $200,000 to an account under the name of Hugh Miller. "My God," I whispered, my voice barely audible. She paid him. She paid him to help her kill Matthew. Gloria nodded grimly. "There's more." She produced another document. It's a copy of a birth certificate. Isabella's. But something is very wrong. The mother's name isn't Ashley. It says Lydia Torres. Who is Lydia Torres? I asked. Here's the translation, rewritten in a style of interpret and clarify, with slight expansion. She was the only pure thing left of my son, the only good that had managed to survive all the darkness that had engulfed us. "I missed you so much, my love," I whispered softly to her. She responded with a sweet smile. She proudly showed me a little brown bear doll clutched in her hand and began weaving a story about its adventures. I listened intently, all the while watching Ashley from the corner of my eye. She had fake passports for herself and the girl, and $500,000 in cash divided among several suitcases. "Where is Isabella?" I asked, my voice laced with desperation. "She's with social services. She's fine, scared, but fine. They're going to need you to go and identify yourself as her grandmother to see if she can stay with you temporarily while we resolve all of this." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Isabella was safe, away from Ashley, and I could have her with me, protect her as I should have done from the beginning. "I want to see her now," I insisted, my voice filled with emotion. The detective nodded. "Of course, but first, I need you to see this." He gestured toward a monitor displaying a recording from the interrogation room. Ashley was sitting across from another detective, her arms crossed defensively, her jaw clenched tight. "I have nothing to say," she stated, her voice cold and defiant. "I want a lawyer." The detective interrogating her didn't flinch. "He's on his way. But in the meantime, why don't you explain to me why you were trying to flee the country with $500,000 in cash?" Ashley remained silent, her eyes fixed on the table. The detective continued, his voice unwavering. "We have evidence, Ashley. Messages, photos, bank transfers. We know about Hugh. We know about Lydia.
We know about Matthew.
Everything." Hearing Matthew's name, Ashley finally looked up, her eyes betraying a flicker of something dark and dangerous. "You don't know anything," she said, her voice laced with venom. "You can't prove anything." The detective smiled, a chillingly triumphant expression. "Oh, yes, we can. We have the phone you hid in Isabella's blanket, the same one you threw in the trash, thinking no one would ever find it. We have the messages where you meticulously planned the murder of your husband. We have the transfers to Hugh Miller." Ashley turned pale, her composure crumbling. "That phone, how?" I accompanied them, determined to witness the unraveling of her meticulously constructed life. They searched every room, methodically examining drawers, closets, and even lifting rugs. They knocked on walls, listening for the telltale hollow sound of hidden compartments. After 4 hours of painstaking searching, one of the officers shouted from the basement, "I found something." We all rushed downstairs. The officer had moved an old bookshelf, revealing a small, discreet safe built into the wall. "We need to open it," the detective declared. They called in a specialist, who expertly cracked the safe in approximately 20 minutes. Inside, we discovered a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. There were external hard drives, USB drives, folders filled with documents, and printed photos. Everything was meticulously organized, each file labeled, each document neatly in its place. It was Ashley's personal archive, a detailed record of her heinous crimes. "It's as if she wanted to remember everything," the detective observed, examining the contents. "As if she was proud of what she had done." Among the files were videos Videos of Ashley and Hugh meticulously planning Matthew's murder, and even videos of Ashley confessing to everything on camera as if she were documenting her crimes for posterity. In one of the videos, Ashley spoke directly to the camera, her voice chillingly cold and devoid of any emotion. "If anyone is watching this, it means I made a mistake, that I got caught," she said. "But I want you to know that I don't regret a single thing. I did what I had to do. I eliminated obstacles. I took what I deserved. Matthew was weak. Lydia was simply a means to an end. Adrian was a risk. The elderly were opportunities. I feel no remorse. I simply did what no one else had the courage to do." The video ended abruptly. The detective switched off the screen, his expression grim. "With this, her case is sealed," he said. "I am doing my best to be, for her, what you would have been. I miss you every day, but I keep going for her for you." Then I went to Lydia's grave. It was simpler, with fewer flowers and fewer visitors. "Hello, Lydia," I said. "We didn't meet, but I am taking care of your daughter. I love her, as if she were my own. She is wonderful. She inherited your strength and your bravery. I want you to know that she is safe, that she is happy, that she will never lack love." The wind blew softly, rustling the leaves of the nearby trees. I felt a strange peace, as if both of them were thanking me, as if they knew that I had kept my promise, that I had protected Isabella, that I had given her the life she deserved. I returned home as the sun began to set. Isabella was waiting for me with dinner ready. We ate together, we laughed, and we told stories. When it was time for bed, I went to my room, took the new blanket Isabella had given me, and wrapped myself in it. As I closed my eyes, I thought about everything that simple blanket represented. The old one had guarded secrets, exposed lies, and brought justice. The new one guarded promises, hopes, and unconditional love. Both were part of our story, of our journey. As I looked at the stars through my window, I understood something profound. That water never forgets, that secrets always find a way to surface, that the truth, although painful, is always better than a lie, and that love, true love, survives any darkness. The blanket had been the beginning, but Isabella was the end, the happy ending none of us expected, the miracle born from tragedy. As I drifted off to sleep, I whispered one last prayer for Matthew, for Lydia, for Adrian, and for all of Ashley's victims. Rest in peace. Your sacrifice was not in vain. Isabella lives. Isabella thrives. Someone had opened the blanket, inserted something inside, and then sewn it back up so meticulously that it was nearly impossible to detect. I went to my nightstand and retrieved my sewing scissors, the same ones I had used to knit that blanket years ago. My hands were shaking so violently that I could barely hold them. I took a deep breath, located the start of the seam, and began to cut slowly. Thread by thread, every snip of the scissors echoed too loudly in the silence of my room. I felt like I was unveiling something forbidden, something I shouldn't touch. But I couldn't stop now. I cut the last threads, exposing the opening. I slipped my fingers inside and felt something cold and metallic. I carefully pulled it out, and when I held it in my hands, the air rushed from my lungs. It was a cell phone, small, black, turned off, and old, based on the model, maybe 4 or 5 years old. I held it as if it were a ticking bomb. Questions flooded my mind like a raging river. Why had Ashley hidden a phone in Isabella's blanket? How long had it been there? Why had she sewn it in so carefully? And why now, after 3 years, had she decided to throw the whole thing away? I searched in my dresser drawer and found an old charger I kept just in case. I plugged it into the wall, then plugged in the phone. And I waited. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours. My breathing was shallow, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The screen flickered, and a faint light appeared in the corner. It was charging. I continued to wait 5 minutes, 10 minutes, until finally, the screen lit up completely. It didn't have a password or a security code. It opened directly to the main menu, as if someone had wanted it to be easily accessible, or as if they had never imagined anyone else would find it. My fingers trembled on the screen. There were several apps, messages, gallery, contacts, notes. I started with the gallery, touched the icon, and what I saw froze me to the core. Ashley was standing by the window, glued to her phone. She seemed distracted, on edge, like someone impatiently waiting for news or a visitor. Seizing the opportunity, I discreetly pulled out my cell phone and quickly typed a message to Gloria. "Come in now." A few minutes later, the doorbell chimed, startling Ashley. "Were you expecting someone?" I inquired, striving for a tone of casual indifference. She shook her head, a frown etching itself onto her face. She reluctantly walked to the door and opened it. Gloria stood there, offering a warm, friendly smile. "Hello," she greeted us. "Excuse the interruption. I'm Gloria, Elenina's neighbor. I came with her, but I realized I left a bag in the car. Would it be all right if I used your restroom? It's rather urgent." Ashley hesitated, her eyes darting from Gloria to me, assessing the situation. I gave a subtle nod, acting as if this were the most ordinary occurrence. "Sure." Ashley finally conceded, pointing down the hall. "First door on the left." Gloria stepped inside, giving me a quick, knowing glance that conveyed her understanding. She would discreetly search for anything of interest while I kept Ashley occupied, buying her precious time. I launched into conversation, asking Ashley about her work, how she was coping with everything, and whether she needed any help with Isabella. Ashley responded with clipped, terse phrases, her attention clearly elsewhere. She kept glancing at her phone, radiating an unsettling restlessness. I persisted, attempting to hold her attention. I mentioned that I had unearthed some old photographs of Matthew and that I would love to share them with Isabella when she was older, so she could get to know her father through those memories. The mention of Matthew seemed to visibly tighten Ashley. "Yes, of course, when she's older," she agreed, her voice sounding strained, almost harsh. Her gaze flickered toward the hallway. "Your friend is taking quite a long time." She stopped abruptly, realizing she had said too much. The detective leaned forward, his eyes boring into her. "Your mother-in-law found it. Elenina, the woman from whom you snatched her son. The woman who is now going to keep Isabella while you rot in prison." Ashley's expression morphed from panic to unadulterated fury. That meddling old woman. I knew I shouldn't have let her near the girl. I knew she was snooping. That's why I wanted to leave. That's why I needed to disappear before it was too late. "Disappear?" the detective challenged, his voice cutting through the air. "Like you made Lydia Torres disappear?" The name dropped like a bomb, shattering Ashley's carefully constructed facade. She fell silent, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. "I don't know who you're talking about," she stammered, her voice barely audible. The detective retrieved a photo from his file and placed it on the table in front of her. It was Lydia, young, smiling, and alive. Lydia Torres, Isabella's real mother. The girl who disappeared 4 years ago. The same girl we found dead in a lot that belongs to the company where your accomplice, Hugh Miller, worked. Ashley closed her eyes, her face contorted in a mask of despair. "I want a lawyer. I'm not going to say anything else." The detective leaned back in his chair, his expression unwavering. "Suit yourself. But this is not going to disappear. We have enough to convict you for double homicide, for fraud, for falsification of documents. You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison." The recording ended, leaving a chilling silence in the observation room. Detective Roberts turned to me, his expression grim. "She still won't confess, but she will. The evidence is overwhelming." "What's going to happen to Hugh?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We've arrested him, too. He's in another room, and he's talking. She is going to spend the rest of her life behind bars." The trial commenced 2 months later. The courtroom was packed with journalists, curious onlookers, and the grieving family members of the victims Ashley had left in her wake. I sat in the front row, determined to look her in the eyes and let her know that she had not won, that the truth had finally come to light. Ashley entered the courtroom in handcuffs, wearing a plain, dark gray suit. Her hair was pulled back, and she wore no makeup. She looked different, smaller, almost vulnerable. She was no longer the picture-perfect woman everyone had known. She was simply a criminal facing the consequences of her actions. Our eyes met briefly. For a fleeting moment, I glimpsed something in her eyes. It wasn't regret, but pure, unadulterated rage. Rage that she had been caught, that her meticulously crafted plan had unraveled. She quickly averted her gaze, sat down next to her lawyer, and the trial began. The prosecutor, a woman in her 40s, was firm and direct. She presented the case with unwavering precision, methodically displaying the photos, the incriminating messages from the phone, the videos recovered from the safe, and the compelling testimonies of forensic experts. Each piece of evidence served as another nail in Ashley's coffin. He was called to testify. He entered the courtroom in shackles, looking broken and gaunt. He began to speak in a trembling voice, recounting how Ashley had seduced him, how she had proposed the plan to kill Matthew, and how the two of them had waited until Matthew was alone. I held his arms, Hugh confessed, his voice choked with emotion. Ashley pushed him. I saw him fall down the stairs. I heard the sickening thud of his head against the floor, and I did nothing. I just stood there while she calmly called emergency services, faking panic. Tears streamed down my face as I listened to the gruesome details of my son's death. There were pictures, lots of pictures. The first one was of Ashley. She was in an elegant restaurant, smiling radiantly. But she wasn't alone. A man stood beside her, young and handsome. He had his arm around her shoulders, and he was kissing her cheek. The photo was dated. It had been taken 4 years ago, when Matthew was still alive, when Ashley was still married to my son. I felt something inside me shatter. I continued to swipe through more photos, Ashley with the same man on the beach, in a hotel, in a car, hugging, kissing. All the photos were from 4 years ago. Ashley was having an affair. She was cheating on Matthew, and he had never known. He had never suspected a thing. Tears streamed down my cheeks. My son had loved that woman. He had trusted her, and she had betrayed him in the worst way. But that wasn't all. I kept searching. There were videos, several video files saved in a separate folder. I touched the first one. The screen went black, and then the image appeared. It was a home recording. The camera was fixed, as if resting on a piece of furniture. I could see a living room, Ashley and Matthew's living room. I recognized the gray sofa, the coffee table, the painting on the wall. And then they appeared, Ashley and that same man. They came in laughing. She was wearing a lavender dress, and he had his arm around her waist. He kissed her, and they tumbled onto the sofa. The scene was explicit, too explicit. I stopped the video. I couldn't bear to watch anymore. I felt sick to my stomach. But I needed to know more. I needed to understand what was going on. I opened the Messages app. There were long conversations between Ashley and a contact saved only as H. I started reading. The messages were from 4 years ago. At first, they were romantic. Ashley told him how much she loved him, how much she missed him, that she couldn't bear being away from him, and that she hated having to pretend with Matthew. That name, Matthew, my son. Perhaps she isn't feeling well. I improvised. At our age, these things sometimes take a little longer. Ashley didn't appear convinced. She rose to her feet. I'm going to check on her. My heart pounded in my chest. I needed to stall her. Wait, Ashley. There's something I wanted to ask you. She paused, turning her attention back to me, a question in her eyes.
What is it?
I took a deep breath, knowing I had to make this believable. Isabella's blanket, the one I knitted for her. I haven't seen it around lately. Are you still using it? Her expression shifted, a flicker of panic flashing across her face before she quickly regained her composure. The blanket? Yes, of course. It's in the washing machine. It got dirty. She was lying. I knew it with a certainty that resonated deep within me, but I couldn't confront her just yet. Oh, that's good. I'm glad you still have it. Matthew loved it so much. I mentioned my son again deliberately, wanting to gauge her reaction. Ashley pressed her lips together, a subtle tension in her jaw. Yes, Matthew loved a lot of things. There was an edge to her tone, a hint of bitterness and resentment simmering beneath the surface. Before I could respond, Gloria reappeared in the hallway. Sorry for the delay. I'm feeling much better now. Ashley regarded her with suspicion. That's great. Gloria walked toward me, gently touching my shoulder, a prearranged signal that she had found something. We needed to leave. Well, Ashley, we shouldn't intrude any further. Thank you for letting us see Isabella. I stood up and leaned down to kiss my granddaughter's forehead. I love you, little one. Grandma will be back soon. Isabella wrapped her small arms around me in a hug. Bye, Grandma. Ashley escorted us to the door, closing it quickly, almost forcefully, as soon as we were outside. Gloria and I walked in silence to the car, the weight of the unspoken heavy in the air. He's blaming Ashley for everything, claiming she manipulated him, that he was just following orders, and that he was afraid of her. I wasn't surprised. Cowards always looked out for themselves. Tell me what else Hugh said. The detective opened his notepad, flipping through the pages. According to Hugh, Ashley contacted him 4 years ago. They were having an affair. She told him she was tired of her marriage, that Matthew was boring and controlling, and that she wanted a different life. She proposed the plan. Wait until Matthew is alone at home, push him down the stairs, and make it look like an accident. In exchange, they would share the life insurance money. My stomach churned, the details of their meticulously planned treachery sickeningly vivid. Hearing how they had conspired to kill my son was almost unbearable. Hugh says that at first he refused, but Ashley convinced him. She showed him the insurance papers, the $500,000, and promised him $200,000 for himself, and a life together after everything was over. Gloria, who had remained silent until now, spoke up, her voice filled with a quiet intensity. What about Lydia? What did Hugh say about her? The detective turned a page in his notepad. That's where the story gets even darker. According to Hugh, Ashley met Lydia at the hospital where she worked. Lydia was a patient, having come in for pregnancy complications. She was alone with no family and no resources. Ashley saw an opportunity. She befriended Lydia, offering her help and suggesting that she could stay at her house after the baby was born. Lydia accepted, as she had no one else to turn to. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Ashley had planned everything from the very beginning, wanting to take Lydia's baby and raise her as her own. The detective nodded, his expression grim. Exactly. According to Hugh, Ashley lied to Matthew, telling him she was pregnant. She wore loose clothing and faked symptoms, successfully deceiving him. It was utterly heartbreaking, but I needed to hear it, to know exactly what they had done to him. Hugh continued his testimony, recounting how Ashley had asked him for help in getting rid of Lydia. Ashley gave her something, a drug that rendered her unconscious, he explained. I took her to the remote lot. Ashley struck her head with a rock, and then we buried her. The entire thing took less than an hour. The courtroom was deathly silent, filled only with the sound of collective, horrified breathing. Hugh also described his role in Adrian's death. Ashley followed him that night, waiting until he reached a lonely stretch of road. She rammed his car with her own, forcing him off the road. Then, she reported the accident as if she had simply been passing by. No one suspected a thing. Ashley's lawyer attempted to discredit Hugh's testimony, arguing that he was lying to reduce his own sentence and blaming Ashley for everything to save himself. But Hugh remained steadfast. I am not lying, he insisted. I have to live with this for the rest of my life. The least I can do is tell the truth. Next, the forensic experts took the stand, presenting the results of the autopsies, detailing the marks on Matthew's wrists, the type of trauma Lydia had sustained, and the medications found in the bodies of the elderly patients at the hospital. Every piece of scientific evidence corroborated Hugh's version of events. Former coworkers and patients who had survived Ashley's schemes also testified, recounting strange incidents and suspicious behavior they had witnessed. Each testimony added another layer to the story, further solidifying the mountain of proof against Ashley. The trial lasted for 3 long, grueling weeks. Finally, the time arrived for closing arguments. The prosecutor stood before the jury. Ashley is not someone who simply made a mistake, she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. She is not someone who acted on impulse. She spoke of him as if he were a mere nuisance, as if he were an obstacle in her way. The messages continued, becoming darker and more desperate. Ashley wrote to that man that she wanted to be with him, that she wanted a life together, but that Matthew wouldn't agree to a divorce, that he was too traditional, and that he would never let her go. And then a message appeared that broke my soul. There has to be another way. I can't keep going like this. I need him to disappear. My hands dropped the phone. It fell onto the bed. My breathing ceased. I read that message over and over. I need him to disappear. It couldn't be true. I couldn't be reading what I thought I was reading. I picked up the phone again and continued to scroll down the conversation. The man replied, "Don't say crazy things. Just wait. We'll find a way." But Ashley insisted, message after message growing more desperate. "I don't want to wait anymore. I want to be with you now. Matthew is the problem. If he weren't here, we'd be free." And then a few days later, another message, this one even more chilling. "I talked to someone who can help us. I just need you to trust me."
The man replied, worried.
"What did you do? Who did you talk to?" But Ashley gave no details. She simply said that soon everything would be resolved, that soon they would be free, and that soon they could be together without hiding. The messages ended abruptly a week before Matthew's death. There were no more conversations after that date, as if they had both stopped using that phone, as if they had wanted to erase any trace of their communication. I got up from the bed and paced around the room, trying to process what I had just discovered. Ashley had planned something. She had talked about making Matthew disappear. And a week later, my son was dead. Had it really been an accident, or had it been something else? The doctor's words echoed in my mind. Severe head trauma. Fall down the stairs. Once inside, I closed the door, the sound echoing the finality of what was to come. "What did you find?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Gloria reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. It was in her bedroom closet, hidden under some boxes. I opened the envelope, my hands trembling slightly. Inside were documents related to Matthew's life insurance policy. My son had a policy for $500,000, with Ashley listed as the beneficiary. The entire amount had been collected just 3 months after his death. There were also bank statements detailing large transfers, including one for $200,000 to an account under the name Hugh Miller. "My God," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. She paid him. She paid him to help her kill Matthew. Gloria nodded grimly. "There's more." She produced another document. It's a copy of a birth certificate, Isabella's. But there's something strange. The mother's name isn't Ashley. It says Lydia Torres. Who is Lydia Torres? I asked, my mind reeling. Gloria shook her head. "I don't know, but according to this document, she's Isabella's biological mother, not Ashley." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I couldn't grasp it. Isabella wasn't Ashley's daughter, but Ashley had been pregnant. I had seen it with my own eyes. We all had. Gloria pointed to the date on the certificate. "Look at Isabella's date of birth. It doesn't match what Ashley told us. There's a difference of 2 months. I checked the certificate, my heart pounding in my chest. Gloria was right. According to that document, Isabella had been born months before Ashley had announced her pregnancy. This doesn't make any sense. Did Ashley fake a pregnancy? Did she steal a baby?
"I don't know," Gloria admitted.
"But we need to find Lydia Torres. She's the key to all of this." We returned to my home, the silence punctuated only by the hum of the car. When Lydia gave birth, Ashley took the baby. She told Matthew that she had given birth at home, that everything had happened so quickly. And Lydia, what happened to her? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The detective took a deep breath. "Hugh says that Ashley gave her something, a drug, so that Lydia couldn't resist. She then took her to the lot where they later found her body and killed her, using the same method as with Matthew, head trauma." Tears streamed down my face, a torrent of grief and rage. Ashley wasn't just a murderer. She was a monster. She had killed a defenseless young woman, stolen her baby, and then killed my son to keep the money and maintain her charade. And Isabella's father, the real father, did they find him? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. According to the records we found, Lydia never registered the father. Either she didn't know him, or she didn't want to involve him. We are investigating, but for now, there is no trace of him. I wiped away my tears, steeling myself for what I knew I had to do. I want to see Isabella, please. The detective led me to another wing of the building, a small waiting room furnished with toys and colorful posters. A social worker was present, and in a corner, playing quietly with colored blocks, was my granddaughter. Isabella, I whispered, my voice filled with longing. She looked up, her eyes widening as she recognized me. And then, she ran toward me, her small face alight with joy. Grandma. I scooped her up in my arms, holding her tight against my chest. She clung to me, her little body trembling slightly. She was scared and confused, but she was safe now. I'm here, my love, I murmured, stroking her hair. Everything is going to be all right. The social worker approached, her expression kind. Mrs. Elenina? I'm Mary, from Child Protective Services. Detective Roberts has explained the situation to me. She is a predator, calculating, cold, and utterly ruthless. She killed at least 6 people, possibly more, without any sign of remorse. She destroyed families, ruined lives, stole a baby from her real mother, and murdered her own husband, all for the sake of money and insatiable ambition, because she believed she deserved more than she had. She does not deserve compassion. She deserves justice. She deserves to spend the rest of her life paying for the unspeakable crimes she committed. Ashley's lawyer attempted to sow seeds of doubt, arguing that the evidence was circumstantial and that his client had been the victim of a smear campaign. Hugh Miller is the real culprit, he insisted. He is using Ashley as a scapegoat. He urged the jury not to convict someone based solely on the words of a confessed criminal, but his arguments fell flat. The jury deliberated for 6 tense hours. When they returned, the tension in the courtroom was almost palpable. The judge asked for the verdict. The jury foreman stood and read the charges. In the case of the murder of Matthew Stone, we find the defendant guilty. In the case of the murder of Lydia Torres, we find the defendant guilty. In the case of the murder of Adrian Wells, we find the defendant guilty. In the cases of the 3 elderly patients at the hospital, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty on all counts. I looked at Ashley. Her face betrayed no emotion whatsoever. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply sat there, as if none of it mattered to her, as if she had accepted her fate long ago. The judge spoke, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom. Ashley Wilson has been found guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder. I sentence her to 6 consecutive life sentences, without the possibility of parole. A collective murmur rippled through the courtroom. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by a complex mix of emotions. It was finally over. But now everything took on a different meaning, a horrifying meaning. I picked up the phone again and checked the notes. There was a single entry, written 2 days before Matthew's death. It said, Tuesday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He will be alone. Everything has to look natural. An accident. No one can suspect. My legs buckled, and I sank back down onto the bed. Tears flowed uncontrollably down my face. My son hadn't died in an accident. My son had been murdered. And Ashley, the woman he had trusted, the mother of his daughter, had been a part of it all. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed, the phone clutched in my hands, reading and rereading those messages. Every word was a stab to the heart. Every sentence confirmed what my heart already knew, but my mind had refused to accept. Matthew hadn't died in an accident. My son had been murdered, and the woman who had sworn to love him until death had planned everything. She had orchestrated his death as if it were something as simple as moving house or changing jobs. The tears had ceased. Only a deep emptiness remained in my chest, a black hole that swallowed everything, my memories of Ashley, the image I had of her. Everything had crumbled in a matter of hours. When the sun began to rise, I made a decision. I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't let Ashley continue to be free, walking around the world as if she hadn't done anything, raising Isabella with those blood-stained hands, the same hands that had plotted to kill my son. But I needed help. I needed someone I could trust, someone who wouldn't think I was crazy, someone who would believe me. I thought about the police, but how could I show up with a phone I had retrieved from the trash? How could I explain that I found it sewn into a blanket? I needed more than that. I needed to understand the whole story. I needed to know who that man was, that H that appeared in the messages. And I needed to know if they had actually gone through with their plan. Once inside, we spread the documents across the living room table. The phone, the photos, the messages, the insurance papers, the birth certificate, everything. The pieces of the puzzle began to align, forming a horrifying picture. Ashley had meticulously planned Matthew's murder to secure the insurance money, enlisting Hugh as her accomplice and paying him with a portion of her ill-gotten gains. But there was another story woven into this web of deceit, the story of Lydia Torres and Isabella. "We need to search for information about Lydia," I insisted, my fingers flying across the keyboard of my laptop. Lydia Torres. Several profiles appeared, but none seemed to fit. I added the city to the search query, and then I found it a local newspaper article from 4 years ago. The headline screamed, "Young mother missing. Family asks for help locating Lydia Torres." There was a photo of her, a young woman of 23, with long hair and hauntingly sad eyes. The article stated that she had disappeared, leaving behind her 2-month-old baby. "Isabella?" I whispered, the name catching in my throat. Gloria read the article over my shoulder, her face etched with concern. Or maybe she didn't leave her. Maybe Ashley made her disappear. The thought sent a chill through my veins. "Do you think Ashley killed Lydia, too?" "I don't know," Gloria replied. "But think about it. Ashley needed a baby to complete her perfect family facade with Matthew. Maybe she met Lydia, took advantage of her vulnerability, and then, when she no longer needed her, got rid of her." It was a monstrous theory, but it made a terrible kind of sense. I searched for more information about Lydia's disappearance, finding another article, more recent, from 6 months ago, "Remains of missing young woman found, identified as Lydia Torres." They had discovered her body in an abandoned lot on the outskirts of the city. "We're going to need to conduct an evaluation before letting Isabella go with you, but everything indicates that it's what's best for the child. I will do whatever is necessary," I declared, my voice resolute. "I just want to take care of her, to protect her." Mary smiled warmly. "I know, and I can see that she loves you. That's very important." I spent the next few hours with Isabella, talking to her in soothing tones and assuring her that everything would be all right. I told her she would be staying with me for a while, careful to avoid mentioning Ashley. Not yet. She was too young to understand the complexities of the situation. I would explain everything to her later, when she was older and better equipped to process the truth. For now, she just needed to feel loved and safe. Mary conducted the evaluations, her questions gentle and thorough. Everything seemed to indicate that placing Isabella in my care was the best course of action. I would do whatever it took to provide her with the love, stability, and security she deserved. Mary inspected my home, assessing my capacity to care for a 3-year-old. She questioned me extensively about my health, financial stability, and the strength of my support system. Throughout the entire process, Gloria remained by my side, offering unwavering support and acting as a witness. Finally, at the end of that long day, Mary gave her approval. "Isabella can stay with you on a temporary basis," she announced. "There will be follow-up visits and eventually a formal hearing to determine permanent custody, but for now, you are her legal guardian." I promptly signed all the necessary legal documents. Taking Isabella's small hand in mine, we exited the building together. Gloria drove us back to my house in her car. Isabella slept peacefully in my lap during the entire ride, her breathing soft and even. Once we arrived at my house, I gently carried her to my bedroom and laid her down on my bed. Ashley would never leave prison, and she would never be able to harm anyone again. Justice had been served, but I felt no joy, only a profound sense of emptiness, because none of it would bring Matthew back. After the trial, Detective Roberts approached me. "Justice," he said simply, offering a small, sad smile. I nodded. "Yes, but at what cost? He placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. You saved Isabella, he said. That's what's truly important. You gave her a chance to have a normal life, a life free from lies and deceit.
He was right.
Isabella was what mattered now. She was my reason for continuing. I returned home to find Gloria waiting for me with Isabella, who was happily playing with her dolls. When she saw me, she ran toward me, her face lighting up with joy. Grandma, where were you? I had something important to do, my love, I replied, scooping her up in a hug. But I'm done now. Now I'm here with you. I held her tight, inhaling the sweet scent of cookies and happiness that radiated from her. She was all I needed. The following days were calmer. The media circus gradually faded away as people found other stories to sensationalize. I focused all my attention on Isabella, striving to give her the childhood she deserved. We went to the park, read stories together before bed, and baked cookies in the kitchen. Little by little, she started calling me Mom. At first, it surprised me, but then I realized it was perfectly natural. I was the only maternal figure she had in her life now. Is it okay if I call you Mom? She asked me one night, her big, innocent eyes searching mine. She was 4 years old already, lying in her bed as I gently stroked her hair. Of course, my love, I replied softly. You can call me whatever makes you feel comfortable. Her face broke into a radiant smile. Mom, Grandma, she said, testing the sound of the words. I laughed. Mom, Grandma, I repeated. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. I decided to call Gloria, my lifelong neighbor, a 65-year-old woman who had been my confidant since my husband's death. She knew how to listen. She knew how to keep secrets, and above all, she knew me well enough to know that I wouldn't fabricate something like this. I dialed her number, and she answered on the third ring. Her voice sounded sleepy. Elenina, are you okay? It's 6 o'clock in the morning. I took a deep breath. Gloria, I need you to come to my house now. It's urgent. There was a silence. Then I heard movement. I'll be right there. She hung up. 15 minutes later, Gloria was knocking on my door. I opened it. She looked at me with concern. Her hair was pulled back in a quick ponytail, and she was wearing a mustard-colored sweater over her pajamas. What happened? You look terrible. I stepped aside to let her in, closed the door, and led her to my bedroom. I showed her the blanket spread out on the bed. The phone was still connected to the charger, and I started telling her everything. I told her how I saw Ashley throwing the blanket away, how I rescued it, how I found the hidden phone, and what I had discovered on it. Gloria listened in silence, her face shifting from surprise to horror. When I finished speaking, she picked up the phone and examined the photos, the videos, the messages, and the note. Her hands were shaking, too. When she looked up at me, there were tears in her eyes. My God, Elenina, this is evidence of murder. I nodded. I know, but I can't just go to the police. I need more proof.
I need to know who that man is.
I need to understand everything before I take the next step. Gloria sat on the bed, lost in thought for a moment. What if we look on Ashley's social media? Maybe that man appears in her contacts. It was a good idea. That was the contact in the phone, right? I nodded and took out my laptop. I opened Facebook and searched for Ashley's profile. The investigation had been closed, the cause of death listed as head trauma, the same cause as Matthew's death. It can't be a coincidence, I declared, my voice trembling. Ashley killed her. She killed Lydia to keep Isabella, and then she killed Matthew to keep the money. Gloria took my hand, her eyes filled with worry. Elenina, this is too big. We need to go to the police now. She was right. We couldn't continue investigating on our own. This was evidence of 2 murders, possibly more. We needed professional help. I reached for the phone and looked up the number for the local precinct. I dialed, and a masculine voice answered. Central Precinct. How can I help you? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I need to report a murder, 2 murders. And I have evidence. They scheduled an appointment for me the following day. A detective named Jack Roberts would be assigned to the case, and they instructed me to bring all the evidence I had gathered. I didn't sleep that night, the weight of my discoveries pressing down on me. I tossed and turned in bed, replaying Ashley's lies, the horror of my son's death, the tragedy of Lydia Torres, and the fate of Isabella, my granddaughter, the little girl who wasn't truly my blood relative. But that didn't matter. She was Matthew's daughter in his heart. He had loved her as his own, cared for her, and now that innocent child was in the hands of a murderer, the woman who had killed her real mother and her adoptive father. I couldn't allow Ashley to continue her reign of terror. I had to get Isabella out of that house. I had to protect her. But first, I needed the police to believe my story. I needed them to investigate, to arrest Ashley, to seek justice for Matthew and Lydia. At 9 o'clock the next morning, Gloria and I arrived at the precinct, a gray, imposing building that exuded an aura of cold efficiency. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and aging paper. I carefully covered her with a soft, comforting blanket and sat down beside her, watching her sleep. She bore such a striking resemblance to Matthew, the same captivating eyes, the same distinctive nose. Although she wasn't related to him by blood, she was undoubtedly his daughter in every way that truly mattered. I promise I will protect you, I whispered to her. No one will ever hurt you again. Your dad would have wanted you to be safe, and I will ensure that is exactly what happens. Gloria entered the room and placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. You did it, Elena, she said softly. You saved that child. I shook my head, deflecting the praise. No, I simply did what any grandmother would do. What I should have done from the very beginning. Gloria sat down next to me. Don't blame yourself, she urged. You couldn't have foreseen Ashley's true nature and what she was capable of. Perhaps she was right, but the guilt still gnawed at me. If only I had been more observant, asked more questions, and been less trusting, maybe Matthew would still be alive, and perhaps Lydia, too. What's going to happen now? Gloria asked, breaking the silence. Detective Roberts is committed to building a strong case, I replied. There will be trials, testimonies. It's going to be a long and arduous process, but Ashley is going to pay for her crimes, and Hugh, too. Gloria nodded firmly. Good. They deserve it. The following months were a complete blur. The case involving Ashley and Hugh quickly became a media frenzy. Newspapers sensationalized the story of the killer nurse, the woman who had murdered her husband, and the biological mother of her child for financial gain. News cameras were constantly camped outside the police precinct whenever there was a hearing. I did my best to shield Isabella from all of it. I enrolled her in preschool and bought her new clothes and toys. Because you're my grandma, but you're also like my mom. My heart melted. I like it, Mom. Grandma sounds perfect. I kissed her forehead. Now sleep. Tomorrow we'll go to the zoo. The months turned into years, and Isabella blossomed into a bright and happy little girl. She started elementary school, made friends, and learned to read and write. She was a brilliant child, full of life and energy. Sometimes, I saw glimpses of Matthew in her gestures and her smile, and that brought me a profound sense of peace. Gloria continued to be my constant confidant and unwavering source of support. We had dinner together every week, talking about everything about Isabella, about life, and about how we had somehow managed to survive the nightmare. You are stronger than you think, she would often tell me. You saved that child, and you gave her a future. One day, when Isabella was 7 years old, she asked me a question that I had been dreading. Mom, Grandma, where's my other mom? The one who carried me in her tummy. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for this difficult conversation. I had carefully rehearsed what I would say. Your mom was named Lydia. I began gently. She was a very brave woman who loved you very, very much. Why isn't she here? Isabella asked, her eyes filled with innocent curiosity. Because she had to go to heaven, I replied, choosing my words carefully. But before she left, she asked me to take care of you, to give you all the love she couldn't give you. It wasn't entirely a lie. In my heart, I truly believed that Lydia would have wanted me to care for her daughter. And my dad, she asked. Another difficult question. Your dad is in heaven, too. His name was Matthew. He was my son, and he would have loved you with all his heart. Isabella pondered this for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. Then you are my real grandma for my dad, she concluded. I nodded, smiling through my tears. Yes, my love. It wasn't locked, and I could see everything, her photos, her posts, and her friends. I started reviewing her contacts list. There were hundreds of names, too many to check one by one. Gloria leaned over my shoulder. Look for men whose names start with H. That was the contact in the phone, right? I nodded and filtered the search. Several names appeared. Henry, Harold, Hugh, Horace, and Herbert. I started opening each profile, looking for the face of the man in the photos, the one who was with Ashley in those compromising images. I checked Henry. It wasn't him. Harold wasn't either. Horace was too old, and Herbert didn't match. And then I opened Hugh's profile. Hugh Miller. And there he was, the same face, the same dark eyes, the same smile. It was him, the man in the photos, the man with whom Ashley had planned to get rid of my son. It's him, I whispered. Gloria looked at the screen. Are you sure? I went back to the phone, compared the photos, and there was no doubt that it was the same man. I returned to his Facebook profile and began to investigate. Hugh Miller, 38 years old. He lived in the same city as us and worked for a construction company. I checked his public photos. There were several from years ago. In some he was alone, and in others he was with friends, but there were no recent photos with Ashley, as if they had erased all trace of their relationship, as if they had never been together. We have to find him, I said. Gloria nodded. But be careful, Elenina. If this man was involved in Matthew's death, he could be dangerous. I knew it, but I didn't care. I needed answers. I needed justice for my son. I searched for more information about Hugh online and found his LinkedIn profile. He worked as a construction supervisor and had contacts with several companies in the area. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. He was a normal man with a normal life, except that he had helped plan a murder. Gloria suggested something I hadn't considered. A receptionist greeted us, and we told her we had an appointment with Detective Roberts. She directed us to a small, sterile waiting room. 15 minutes later, a man who appeared to be in his mid-40s emerged. He was tall, with short hair that was beginning to show streaks of gray at the temples, and piercing eyes that seemed to assess everything at a glance. He wore a beige shirt and dark pants, his attire suggesting a blend of authority and approachability. Mrs. Elenina, he inquired. I nodded, rising to meet him. I'm Detective Jack Roberts. Come in, please. He gestured toward his office, a room filled with towering filing cabinets and stacks of folders, the organized chaos hinting at the complexity of his work. Photos adorned the walls, presumably solved cases, silent testaments to his dedication. We sat down across from his desk, and he settled into his chair, pulling out a notepad. Tell me everything from the beginning, he instructed, his voice calm but firm. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the task ahead, and began to recount the events that had led me to this point. I told him about Matthew's death, how Ashley had portrayed it as a tragic accident, the discovery of the blanket in the trash, the hidden phone, the photos, the messages, the videos, the damning note outlining Ashley's plan. I presented all the evidence I had gathered, the phone, the insurance documents, the bank transfers to Hugh Miller, Isabella's birth certificate bearing Lydia Torres's name, and the newspaper articles detailing Lydia's disappearance and the subsequent discovery of her body. Detective Roberts listened intently, his silence punctuated only by the scratching of his pen as he took notes. He meticulously reviewed each document, examining the photos on the phone and carefully reading the messages. His expression remained serious, his brow furrowed in concentration. When I had finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. I even fixed up a room for her in my house, painting the walls a cheerful, soft yellow and filling it with an array of stuffed animals and colorful books. I desperately wanted her to feel at home, to forget the horrific experiences she had endured. But the nights were particularly challenging. Isabella was plagued by nightmares. She would often wake up crying, calling out for her mom, and I never knew what to say to her. I couldn't bear to tell her that her mom was in prison, that her mom had murdered her dad, and that her mom wasn't even her real mom. Instead, I simply hugged her tightly, sang her soothing songs, and reassured her that she was safe and that I would always take care of her. Gradually, the nightmares became less frequent. Isabella started smiling more, engaging in playful activities, and behaving like a normal, happy child. This gave me a glimmer of hope. Detective Roberts kept me updated on the progress of the case. Hugh had accepted a plea deal with the prosecution, agreeing to testify against Ashley in exchange for a reduced sentence, 25 years instead of life in prison. While it angered me that he was receiving any leniency at all, I understood that his testimony was crucial to securing a conviction. Ashley, on the other hand, adamantly refused to plead guilty. Her lawyer argued that all the evidence was circumstantial, that there was no direct proof linking her to the murders, and that Hugh was simply lying to save his own skin. However, the prosecution had built a solid case. The incriminating messages on the phone, the disturbing photos and videos, the suspicious bank transfers, Hugh's testimony, and the forensic evidence obtained from Matthew's second autopsy all pointed directly to Ashley. The trial was scheduled to begin in 3 months. One afternoon, while Isabella was napping, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Detective Roberts. "Mrs. Elenina, I need you to come down to the precinct," he said urgently. "I am your real grandma." She beamed. "I like it, because then we are connected by the heart." I hugged her tightly, my heart overflowing with love. "Exactly," I whispered. "Connected by the heart." I decided not to tell her about Ashley, not yet at least. Maybe when she was older, when she could better understand the complexities of the situation. Years later, when Isabella turned 16, I finally told her the whole truth.
She deserved to know.
We cried together, and she asked me a barrage of questions as she processed the shocking information. It was an incredibly difficult conversation, but in the end, she said something that I will never forget. "Thank you for saving me," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you for giving me a life." "You saved me too," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "You gave me a reason to keep going after losing your dad." We embraced, and I knew that we had healed together, that despite all the pain and darkness we had endured, we had found our way to the light. The blanket that had started it all was still stored in my closet. I had carefully washed it and repaired the small tear. Sometimes, I would take it out and look at it, remembering how such a seemingly insignificant object had uncovered so many dark secrets and served as the catalyst for discovering the truth. Today, Isabella is 21 years old, studying medicine at college. She wants to become a pediatrician, she says, so she can help children like herself, children who have been through difficult situations and who need someone who understands them. I am so incredibly proud of the woman she has become. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't seen Ashley throwing that blanket in the trash. If I hadn't rescued it and found the hidden phone, Ashley would still be free, and who knows how many more lives she would have destroyed. Isabella might have been growing up under the care of a cold-blooded murderer. But fate had other plans. What if we go to Ashley's house? Maybe we can find more evidence, documents, emails, something that connects everything. It was risky, but it made sense. If Ashley had hidden that phone in Isabella's blanket, maybe she had more things hidden. "We can't just walk in like that," I said. "We need an excuse." Gloria thought for a moment. "What if you tell her you want to see Isabella, that you miss your granddaughter? While you distract her, I can discreetly look around." It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was all we had. We decided to try it that same afternoon. I sent Ashley a message.
Ashley.
"I know I've been persistent lately, but I really miss Isabella. Can I stop by to see her this afternoon just for a little while?" 20 minutes passed before she replied.
A la llanena.
"Today is not a good day. Isabella is a little cranky. Maybe another day." I gritted my teeth. It was always the same. She always had excuses. But this time, I wasn't going to take no for an answer.
"Please, Ashley.
It will only be a few minutes. I bought her a present. I want to give it to her in person." Another silence, then her reply. Fine, but only 30 minutes. I have things to do. It was all I needed. This is serious, he finally stated, his voice measured. Very serious. If what you're telling me is true, we're talking about 2 premeditated homicides, possibly 3 if we include the girl's biological father. I was stunned by his words. The biological father. If Isabella wasn't Ashley's daughter, she had to have a father, someone who had been with Lydia Torres. Do you know anything about him? I asked, my mind racing. I shook my head.
I didn't find anything about that.
The detective made a note of it. I'll investigate. But first, I need to verify this evidence. What are you going to do? I asked, anxiety creeping into my voice. I'm going to reopen the case of your son's death, he replied. I'm going to request an exhumation for a second autopsy, and I'm going to thoroughly investigate the death of Lydia Torres. I'm also going to interrogate Hugh Miller. A wave of relief washed over me. Finally, someone believed me. Someone was going to do something. And Ashley, are you going to arrest her? The detective shook his head. Not yet. I need more evidence before issuing an arrest warrant. I don't want her to escape if she suspects we're investigating her. It made sense, but it frustrated me. There is something you need to see. His voice sounded grave, even more serious than usual. What happened? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. I prefer to explain it to you in person. Can you come this afternoon? I agreed. I asked Gloria to watch Isabella and drove to the precinct. The detective was waiting for me in his office, a thick file sitting on his desk. Please sit down, he said, gesturing to a chair. I sat down and he opened the file. He pulled out several crime scene photos. One depicted the lot where they had discovered Lydia's body, and another showed the staircase, where Matthew had died. Remember when I told you we were investigating Isabella's biological father? He asked. I nodded.
Yes.
You said there was no record. The detective confirmed. Correct. Lydia never listed the father's name on the birth certificate, but we continued to investigate. We interviewed Lydia's former coworkers, friends, and neighbors and uncovered something interesting. Several witnesses mentioned that Lydia had been dating someone, a man who worked at the same hospital as Matthew and Ashley. My stomach churned with a growing sense of dread. Who was he? The detective produced another photo, a hospital ID badge featuring a man in his early 30s with dark hair and light eyes. And then I saw it, the unmistakable resemblance. It was deeply unsettling. On that fateful October afternoon 18 years ago, some unseen force, urged me to act. Something bigger than myself. Perhaps it was Matthew, or maybe it was Lydia guiding me from wherever they were, ensuring that their daughter was safe. Gloria is still my best friend, my confidant, and my rock. She is 83 years old now, and I am 87. We meet every afternoon for tea, reminiscing about old times, about how we survived that terrifying nightmare, and about how we built new, fulfilling lives after the horror. Do you ever think about her? Gloria asked me one afternoon, her eyes filled with concern. I knew exactly who she was referring to, Ashley. Sometimes, I admitted, I wonder if she ever felt anything, any remorse, any guilt. Gloria shook her head sadly. People like her don't feel, she said. They just calculate, they just take. She was right. Ashley had never shown any sign of regret, not even in prison. According to Detective Roberts, who kept in touch with me for years after the trial, she continued to insist that she had done nothing wrong, that she had only taken what she was due, that the world owed her more than it had given her. Hugh, on the other hand, Adrian surprisingly showed remorse. He penned letters to the families of the victims, including one to me, begging for forgiveness.